And we are live. Hopefully we are live. All right, there we go. Beautiful. Timer's up. How's everybody doing tonight? Sorry if we are running a little bit behind tonight. But hey, I figure if the NFL can have a rain delay, we can have a rain delay. So it's perfectly fine. It actually was pretty rough. Rather than doing this at Tripping on Legends location 1, we're at Tripping on Legends location 2. So we have, I had to make my way over here. And in doing that, in addition to the rain, there were about 20 moving trucks that were running down 75 that were basically blocking the entire path here. So we're here. We're only a little bit late. We're still beating the NFL by a half hour. So they were an hour. We're only about a half hour. Good to see like a lot of people coming in. What I'm going to do this one, as opposed to what you have done some of them in the past, is I'm going to go off for a little bit, and not go off on a rant, just go off for a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of address what people are posting. So if I don't stop and say, "Hey, what's going on? Hey, what's going on?" It's only because we're posting this stuff in the Tripping on Legends podcast. And so some people have commented that, like, we wish you would finish a thought before you start talking to the other people. So I will be addressing everything you want, because what I want to know to you guys, although I will say hi, Rita, what I will start out with is this. The theme of tonight's show is the paranormal in and out. And aside from the dirty connotation of that, which I had to explain to Natalie, in addition to the dirty connotation of that, what tonight's episode is about is I'm going to push the NFL out of the frame. What tonight's episode about is what got you into the paranormal, and what are the things that have forced you to leave the paranormal? Thank you very much. What are the things that have forced you to leave the paranormal or think about leaving the paranormal? If you're not a paranormal person, like you're not an investigator, you're just a consumer, right? This show is for you too, because I want to know what are the things that draw you to ghost stories. What are the things that draw you specifically to paranormal media? Like, and if you believe in ghosts or something has happened to believe in ghosts, I want you to share that as well. And I'll get to those after I kind of do my opening tirade. Because it's interesting the way that, and in this time, there's Natalie in the background. In this time and place, we now have enough paranormal media that people are, oh, John's here. Hey, John, what's up? We have enough out there that consumers, to some degree, feel invested in the paranormal world. So it used to be back in the day, you might read a ghost book, you might watch a ghost TV show, and we'll talk about some of that. But now I feel like even people who are just have a passing fancy for even a show like Supernatural or a show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I'm dating myself, or something like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures or some of those other shows. I'm hearing a lot of good things about, I think it's called The Dead Files. You almost feel invested because the people themselves are real and you kind of follow them through, even though it's edited and even though it's not really real, you kind of feel invested in their lives. And it's almost as if, because it's presented as real, because it's reality television, you yourself feel as if you are an investigator, that you have knowledge that someone who doesn't watch those shows doesn't have. So what I want you guys to do while I'm talking is just kind of share some of your the ways that you got into the paranormal, and the way that you first experienced the paranormal that made you want to know more, or that made you want to go out and seek out other paranormal things, whether that's investigating or just watching the TV shows or just getting really into books. And those books can even be like Twilight or some of the we talked about Goosebumps before on the show, and we've talked about scary stories to tell in the dark, things that got you so that you were in that culture, right? And then for those of you guys who are investigators or have groups who do this, go to events, what are the things that made you go from being a person who liked ghost stories to a person who consumes ghost stories, or a person who goes out there and then to the next level tries to find ghosts yourself, right? Because this is there have always been people who have been ghost hunters, whether they've called themselves that or not. But this is the first time in history where the ability to do that is given to everybody. Everyone feels like they can, whether they should or whether they are doing it the right way. Those are not questions for tonight. Those are things that people have discussed in different mediums, so we'll let them handle that. But tonight is just, how did you get into this? And then how did you make that crossover? So I'll tell you, and I don't know the first part of this story. I don't know what got her into it, and I'm not sure Natalie's going to want to share that on air. But I'll tell you what inspired this. So for those of you who are regular viewers, listeners to the show, follow us. We didn't do a show until this week. We put a new episode out, episode 44. Download it if you haven't heard it yet. Before then, we had gone probably about a month and a half where we hadn't done a show. And a lot of that was due to Natalie's disconnect, aversion to the project. And this happened there's a very specific moment that this happened. I like to think she didn't get tired of me. Oh, it could be that. But nope, what happened was Fort DeSoto. And if you haven't listened to the Fort DeSoto episode, you might not know some of the stuff we're talking about. But and if you haven't been listening, then you don't know this. We've dropped little tidbits about it. But part of the legends that were at Fort DeSoto are of a mother. Now, Fort DeSoto held a hospital and a containment center, really, for yellow fever. And so one of the stories that was coming out of Fort DeSoto, one of the legends, is of a mother whose children had all died of yellow fever, and that she is still walking the grounds. Natalie, do you want to block your ears while I tell the story?
No,
Are you going to be okay?
no,
You're
no,
fine?
I'm
Okay.
Come on, I've come to terms with it.
Just come to terms with it. Is of a mother who walks the fort and is looking for her missing children, essentially looking for her dead children. And during the EVP session, we got a very clear EVP of and that we listened to. I think were we on site, or was it on the way home that we listened to it? It was loud. It was an obvious one, and Natalie was just talking and trying to connect with the mother, and she got a voice. And at one point, Natalie says, I know what it's like, because Natalie being...
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine. Or I can't imagine, you said.
No, I can't. She
no.
said, no, you can't.
You said, I can't imagine. And that's why you said, I can imagine what it's like because I'm a mother.
I don't think so. I don't think that's what I said. We're going to have to reference back now.
And the voice said back, like, no, you can't. You can't imagine. You can't, it said. Mm-hmm. And that was too much for her. Right? Because especially Tripping on Legends, this is supposed to be, and we touch some scary stuff, we touch some creepy stuff, but this is supposed to be us connecting with the environments that we're in, and that connection was a intense one and a sad one. And so Natalie shut down. So Natalie's exit point, what the out for Natalie was talking to another mother who she tried to relate to who couldn't. Would that be a good way of saying it? And to know and to think that, like, it wasn't just a fun and games kind of thing. Like, we were talking to people with real personalities, and not that we don't take what we do seriously, but it was an emotional connection that connected to her as a person.
Her pain and the fact that I was able to touch a spirit that was still there searching for her children, that hadn't found peace in a very long time. Right. Or what seems like a long time for us anyways.
I hope that they can hear what you're saying, because it's very powerful.
I'm sure they can.
Don't laugh through it.
I think that was just emotionally overwhelming. I couldn't handle it.
Emotionally overwhelming. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. And
when we got home,
there was a very, very specific attitude shift in Natalie after that. What were you saying?
When we got home and we were looking through those EVPs, and we weren't even doing the equipment or anything. We were just playing with tape recorder.
I mean, it was that loud. We were just literally listening to it.
And it was several things where I was asking questions and she was responding back. And it's been so long now, I can't remember everything, but I remember the emotion. I can remember the way it made me feel, which is, I think, everybody's probably biggest moment in a paranormal experience is that you remember the way that you feel.
She remembered, if you can't hear, she said the biggest point was the way she felt.
Yeah. And it was just too much. It was too sad.
And that's the danger of doing this, is that, there's that spooky aspect, there's that excitement aspect of being on site. And there's that reality that you are sometimes connecting to people who have tragedy in their life, whose story is tragic, not only in their life, but in their death, right? So if you can imagine that mother is, for at least 100 years now, dealing with that grief and that pain, the reality of that is a lot more intense than something spooky happening to you at a site, and that's something that sometimes becomes too intense, right? Like we can deal with the dead better than we can deal with the living. But when the dead are too much like the living, that's when it sometimes becomes too intense. So thank you, Natalie, for allowing me to share that part with it.
Sure.
So I'm going to talk about my in first, and then my out, and then my in again, because I like to go in and out, in and out. So my initial in, and I've told this story a little bit, and I've always told it in a very kind of cutesy way. And I've told the second part of this story just recently on Midnight in the Desert. If you haven't listened to that episode, become a subscriber and listen to it. Tim and I on the show about 2 weeks ago now. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with the paranormal. And I tried to, for this show, think of when did that obsession begin? And I always relate it to, and we did a whole show, I think, on this, because I remember Doreen said she was going to be able to try to find the book for me. I used to get stuck at the library. My parents used to drop me off at the library. I used to walk just from school to the library, and my parents would pick me up there. And I became obsessed with these two books. One was all these spooky stories, and the other one was How to Be a Private Investigator. And part of that was my dad was a private investigator, so I was trying to touch that. And so I read these books over and over and over again. But I was thinking about it, and my paranormal in actually took place probably 3 or 4 years before that. I know. You have not heard this story, I don't think.
How in almost 3 years have I not heard this story?
I know. I was probably, so we had moved to, I know most of you guys think of me as a New Englander, but we had moved for a short time to Rahway, New Jersey. We were right down the street from the state prison, the infamous Rahway State Prison. And I remember that I woke up, and it had to have been 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, which is unusual because we're talking 1979, 1978, 1979. I'm a little kid. And I came downstairs, and the whole house was dark, right? And I remember very specifically coming into the living room, and the TV was in there, and turning the TV on, right? Even when I was 3 years old, knew how to turn the TV on, even before cable, going on the big switches to get them, right?
You're really aging yourself right now.
You don't know. And so I remember putting the TV on, and this is going to be weird if you think of me as a ghost person, but turning the TV on, and it was a documentary on the Patterson film. And so for those of you guys who don't know, the Patterson film is the infamous Bigfoot footage. And so it had to have been, I'm a little kid, right? So if you ask me, it had to have been at least 20 hours long. This documentary was probably an hour long. And I remember sitting there and being absolutely amazed at what I was seeing. Wait a minute, this stuff exists? I had a feeling that there were odd things in the world, right? But sitting there in the dark, watching this documentary, I was totally transfixed, and I became obsessed with Bigfoot. And so I trained myself. This is what I'm saying. You don't know this about me. So I used to wake up. I used to force myself to wake up. And remember, I'm a little kid, right? So I didn't know what time it was when I'd watched it. And I didn't know what channel it was really on. So I used to wake up in the middle of the night and go down to the living room and switch to the channels, watching this, hoping that this documentary would be on again. And I never saw that documentary again. But what I did find was really, really early in the morning. They used to show, I think the way that I remember it was episodes of In Search Of. And I don't know, I mean, I think it was WPIX because we were in like that station. We were in that station area, actually. We used to watch Mets games before I was a Red Sox fan. I was a Mets fan, believe it or not. And I would just consume all of it. I would just sit there and I would be amazed. And that was my initial paranormal in, right? That was like where the obsession began. Then once I found those books, it was like, wait a minute, these stories exist all over the place. And that book was more about legends. And I remember thinking that this is something that I want to do. Like, this is something, Alex, wearing your hat, brother. So my nephew, who just started his senior year of high school, is now in the house, and I am wearing his baseball hat. So he's probably the only one in here who actually knows what the hat is. Fast forward, I'm in college. And I've told this story, but it's not always true the way I tell it. Well, not that it's not true, but I'm at Emerson College, and crazy things are happening at Emerson. And part of it is that people are connecting everything that weird that happens and all the normal college urban legend stuff to the fact that this is a haunted building. And I've told that, like, I started recording the stories that people were saying and noticing that there were inconsistencies, or that a legend from somewhere else that I heard, like a haunted neighborhood house, was being attached to Charles Gate and all this kind of stuff. And that's what sparked my interest in doing it. In reality, the real moment that I can say, right? So sometimes, I'm not sure if Natalie can say what made her want to get into this, but I can say like a very specific moment. Like, we had been using the Ouija board, which was, the urban legend is banned in Charles Gate, but it's really wasn't. We were using the Ouija board, and we were using it like every night for hours and hours and hours. My friend Brad, who wrote the theme song to Tripping on Legends, had come in. So this must have been our junior or sophomore year. He had come in. He had left school to go to University of Indiana. Came in, and so for that whole week, we were obsessed with the Ouija board. We were doing it literally coming home from class, going to dinner, and then coming right down and doing the Ouija board for hours and hours and hours until we like pretty much passed out with our hands like still on it. We were drug addicts, essentially. And we were getting all of this crazy stuff. And that week, everything that we did was connected. For example, the board at one point said that this woman named, I think her name was Heather Gately, was going to be Brad's soulmate. We went to eat at Bennigan's. Did they have Bennigan's down here in Florida?
They did.
They did. We went to Bennigan's, and our waitress was Heather Gately. We didn't even know she had her name tag said Heather. We're like, hey, you're not Heather Gately, are? Yes. And it was really freaky. It was really, and all that stuff to some degree could be explained. We're on the board. Anyone who's read the infamous federal government stories, we were on the board. Federal government was there, and then federal government got kicked off. And a very, very weak spirit came on. And we asked the spirit who it was, and it said FDR, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were like, what? So of all the weird, creepy things, this was the least creepy. It was like a dead president? Like, how lame. If you're a ghost pretending to be someone, don't pretend to be FDR, no matter how much you love the New Deal. What's up, Mr. Colvin? And we said, well, that's really weird. And then we said, trying to talk to it, and it spelt out fear itself. And then boom, immediately got kicked off. Federal government came back on, and things were the way they were. This was at about maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. The next day, so the next morning, so technically the next day, go to the store. Newspaper's there. The front page of the newspaper, it says, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the death of FDR. Natalie just giggled. Such a simple thing. I'm getting goosebumps now, still from it. At that moment, I was like, is this shit real? You know, I mean, you always think it, and you're always doing it, and you like the freaked out part of it.
There's your one curse. You're allowed.
Thank you. I'm not even sure if we're allowed to curse on the Facebook. I thought that we had touched something that was unknowable and unseeable, and that somehow we could document that and understand it. I don't believe you can understand it anymore, but I believe you can still document it, and you can document humans' reactions to it and what it makes it feel like. You know the rest of the story. A little bit later, I started tripping on legends and all this stuff. So I had I'm not going to give details on this part, but I had something really, really tragic happen. And it was in a roundabout way connected to one of the things other than Pukwudgies that I was most associated with at that time. And it really freaked me out and kind of changed a lot of things. But I was handling it. And my fast forward from that, like maybe 6 months, and Tim Weisberg and I were asked to shoot a pilot for a TV show based on haunted objects, right? So this was before Haunted Collector was on. We were asked to shoot this pilot, and we did it. And I was flown up there. We talked about this on Midnight in the Desert in a little bit more detail than I'm giving here. I came back. The pilot wasn't picked up. And I was just looking around. I was watching people responding to Spooky South Coast's posts online, stuff like that. And I just felt like I'm not in line with any of this. I was feeling really creeped out. I was feeling cursed. And I thought the only way to get out of this was to completely eliminate the paranormal from my life. It was a very odd, like empty feeling that by doing this, I had contacted dark things in my life. And those dark things in my life were making things happen that were impacting other people. And the trip back to New England for this show kind of solidified that for me. I found out about the show, like I was asked to be on the show in the middle of my aunt's funeral. And I should say my aunt's wake. So I just felt the only way to get those negative things out of my life was to completely drop it. I remember I was in Facilio, Kia. Those people who are local, it's huge. And because my car had broken down, part of the curse, part of this darkness that I felt, and I literally on my cell phone shut down my website. At that moment, it was like that, instantaneous. And I stopped working with Spooky South Coast. I stopped doing interviews. I stopped everything. And Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads was dead. And that was it. That was it. It was gone. And I tried to move on from that stuff. So for me, my out, which I think is the out for a lot of people, is that something really scary happens, or you start to feel either obsessed with what you're doing, or that by doing this, you've let something dark into your life, or something at least impacting your life. Matt Moniz always says, and I think it's more of like a kind of a twist on the quote from Nietzsche, every step you take towards the paranormal, it takes 2 steps towards you. And oftentimes that 2 steps at some point becomes scary. And it also becomes, especially if you start letting that darkness into your life, like those dark thoughts into your life. I was getting very specific messages from my grandfather, as if my grandfather wanted to connect with me and contact me and talk to me. And I remember, and part of this is my trust issues anyway, but thinking this isn't my grandfather. This is something pretending to be my grandfather to get into my life. I was coming off of the whole Amityville horror incident, where with my connections with Jackie Barrett, I was potentially going to write a book about the killings and about I was going to say DeSalvo. It's killing me. Can't remember his name. Wow, I'm really clear on your version. My version, I'm not, but I'm really clear on yours. And it was that let another darkness into my life, and I felt that it was just too much, and I let it go. But now let me talk quickly about my paranormal back in. So for those of you guys who know me personally, you know that about 3.5 years ago, I went through a divorce. And the divorce leading into it was probably about a year leading into the divorce. Did you know I was divorced?
No.
No, I am.
I'm sorry.
Things got uncomfortable, weird, but about a year before, we'll say. And I spent a lot of time thinking about where my life was and what had gone wrong. It's a really bad way to say that. But what mistakes I had made and what I would do if I could turn back time and go back. And I had a very specific, I'm not going to cry, don't worry. I had a very specific image in my head, and this image I used to think about this every night before I went to bed. And that was that when I had graduated from college, I had immediately gone into the relationship that became my marriage. In this fantasy, these are the kind of fantasies I had. In this fantasy, me and someone else hit the road. Actually, it was a very intricate fantasy. For the next year, I financed it by working constantly. And then we spent an entire year going across the country documenting these legends and these ghostly legends in certain towns. And this literally I used to fall asleep every single night thinking about this.
Don't cry.
Every single night.
You are so close to crying right now. It's not even funny.
I'm going to get through this. I'm not going to cry. Got the divorce. And at some point in my head, it was, well, I'm not 22 anymore. I'm 40. And who's to say that it's too late? And found Natalie.
I found you.
Or she found me, depending on how you look at it. And she was like the perfect person to do this with. So that sparked my back in. And by doing that, and maybe because I'm older now, I've discovered this kind of idea, which I think the most confident of you out there have, which is my voice is my voice. Like, what can I bring to the paranormal? Me. I can bring me to the paranormal, right? So it was one of those things where in doing Tripping on Legends, I was able to kind of discover what my contribution was going to be, which is my contribution was going to be being who I am and bring what I do to it. I haven't suffered my out yet on this time. So maybe my out will be that no one ever listens to the show and I get tired of farting into the wind, if you will, with this.
You're so modest. We have hundreds of listeners.
Literally dozens of people waiting for the things to be released.
So horrible.
So that's my kind of in and my kind of out. And so if I can kind of like an overlapping thing, like we are controlled by emotions in this field. We are humans. But I also think that idea. So the one thing you'll notice that I didn't say was I didn't really have a personal experience that sparked it. And I feel a lot of people get into this, whether it's reading or whether it's actually looking for ghosts or watching TV shows because they've had a personal experience and they're looking to understand it. So I'm going to kind of turn things over a little bit to you. There's also kind of a little tirade that I want to go on. But I'm looking at Rita's post, and Rita says, if you don't want me to read something posted, please just tell me and I won't. She says, the first time I was involved was at my friend's house at a sleepover. In her guest room, and the storage closet opened up and threw a whole bunch of books at only me. Oh my word, I was 11 years old. It was so cool. Right. And there's that scary thing when you're a kid, when those things happen. I used to joke that sleepovers were always about talking about your dreams and talking about ghost stories, right? I can't remember. Now, we're talking about 12, 11, 12, 13-year-old boys sleepovers always ended up talking about our dream. Like, yeah, man, I had this dream once, and there was this guy, and like talking about our dreams, and then always talking about ghosts. And I think a lot of people's initiation into the paranormal happens at those sleepovers. Go back to the episode we did with Ella about sleepovers and
we even had a business idea, the sleepover.
we actually had this day we're going to we should create the urban legend sleepover box of all the things. So I think that's a really common way to get into it. You have this stuff, you're very influential at that time. They say the music you listen to, you start listening to it yourself. Those sleepovers, even though you've got your mom in the background saying, "Hey kids, get to sleep," and you got your dad knocking on the door every little bit because you guys are talking too much, they do feel like they're this isolated little world. You're with your crew, even if it's just two people, and it's nighttime. The time you were supposed to sleep, you're supposed to and you're not asleep, right? You're awake, and you're doing the forbidden things, and ghost stories come up, and that becomes part of your collective mind. That becomes triggered in your mind as this sensation. So I totally agree with that. I am Colleen, who's always an excellent contributor as well. My involvement started when I realized that the old lady who had been coming into my room, sitting on the edge of my bed and talking to me, I'm having a hard time scrolling down here, was my dead aunt. So I would love to know, Colleen, if you can comment. And so, because I'm reading them, you can kind of tell me when people respond, because I'm reading the ones from back up. How old were you when that happened, Colleen? If you could tell us how old you were when that happened. Once again, another personal experience, right? And especially a personal experience that connects you to someone from the past or someone from your past. In this case, I'm imagining because you didn't recognize or you didn't even know your aunt and she was coming back to you. So once again, a personal experience. What I would like to know, Colleen, is when that then became you wanting to be an investigator, like you wanting to get involved in the paranormal. Okay, so Barry.
She was 7 when it happened.
7 when it happened. So what happened later in life that made you then want to investigate it? Barry says, one thing that assisted in my openness to all things spiritual was my Reiki training. Now, Barry, I would be interested to know, because I think an outsider, which some of the people that are here are not necessarily paranormal people, did you get into Reiki because something else happened to you? Like, what was your path to get to Reiki that then opened up your spirituality to it? And I think a lot of people...
Is that how it's pronounced, Reiki? I thought it was Reiki.
You're going to correct me really seriously?
Keep going.
However, you can also correct us on our pronunciation of it if you'd like. Because I would be interested to see whether you had gotten into that because other things had happened. I'm scrolling down to some other people.
It's Reiki.
Reiki?
Barry says.
Barry says it's Reiki. I'm sorry.
Colleen did not find out about it being her aunt until she was 12.
12. Okay.
Wow.
So you went 5 years talking to this woman, thinking she was a real person. Not that she wasn't a real person, but I would be. Oh wait, can I read Natalie's now? My Into the Paranormal came as an infant. I don't think Chris knows this, and she's definitely not going to say it out loud, so I'm going to read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Should I read it in your voice?
Yeah, read it in voice. Do it.
I grew up repeatedly. No,
Elmo? What the hell?
I grew up repeatedly hearing the story of my deceased great aunt visiting me as a newborn. So another relative that did that.
Gotta love those ants.
I know, ants, right? We have to do something on that, man.
Yeah.
Tripping on ants. So my love for all things spiritual and paranormal has... I wish I could just click that, but it won't let me. For most spiritual paranormal has been strong my entire life. I've had so many different kinds of spiritual experiences, scary and comforting. It's really inescapable. And I think that it's one of those things where when you start to do this, we've always talked about connections on Tripping on Legends, like following the signs. I think when you start to do this, you start to submerge yourself in both a culture and an atmosphere that allows other things to happen. That kind of, you start to see that these things are much more common than you think the general public thinks that they are.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, our first conversation when we very first met, was about your paranormal experiences,
Mhm.
which I won't share because they're not my experiences. I don't know if
I've
we've ever
shared them on
talked
air.
about it.
Yeah,
oh,
I've
have we?
shared them on
Okay, so
Barry did comment that he was attuned at the age of 20 by a friend who knew his love of spirituality. But he's ironically never had an actual paranormal experience since he's been attuned. But it certainly affected my mindset and how he views the afterlife.
now let me ask you, Barry, again. Not that this is tripping on Barry now, but I'm very interested in those kinds of things and in spirituality. Not being a very spiritual person myself. Are you looking for an actual experience, or because your spirituality is so deep, you don't need that to kind of be satisfied with where you are? I would love to know that idea. We've got a lot of comments here, kiddo. Scrolling through. And it's stuck. It won't let me go. Okay, it's frozen a little bit here. So I'm scrolling down. So Natalie, you seem to be able to catch on to those.
Yes, I can. So Colleen just actually had a really interesting comment.
Yeah.
I'll read it on there, but I don't want to be on there.
Okay.
Okay. So Colleen says, okay, so her researching started when she was about 9. And her dad dared me to truth that Lizzie Borden did not commit the murders. And then I found out the house was purported to be haunted. So I started doing research. What got me into active investigations was when I started working at the Lizzie Borden house and I got to meet some amazing investigators. Because if you're working in a place and there's folks investigating, they're going to mostly offer you to let you investigate with them. So that's why she got started. And one of her first investigations was with Tim Weisberg in Spooky South Coast.
Okay, so Spooky South Coast is the heart of all really good paranormal inns. is watching Spooky South Coast and working with those guys. Yeah, and that's, I think that if there is something in your neighborhood or something that's close to you that is haunted, it becomes part of your DNA, becomes part of who you are as a person. I can imagine all those people in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, have to, just completely love the paranormal, or at least like be submerged in it. Or if you grew up near Salem, and that time comes around when Salem's the focus of everything, or Sedonia or something like that. These places that have this deep culture of it probably impacts like your paranormal inn. I'm continuing to scroll down. I'm frozen again here. All right, so while waiting for more people, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to call it snootiness of the paranormal inn. Oh, wait, Barry's speaking, so I'm going to, I'd love to have an actual experience. But the beauty of Reiki is that it gives that feeling of it, as if it's meant to all happen. The feeling behind Reiki is we are all where we are meant to be. I would love to be able to feel that.
I completely agree with you, Barry.
Okay, good. I thought you were going to follow up on
that.
Nope. You sound like you had other stuff to say.
Nope, that's all. That's
okay,
it.
all right.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Anyone who knows me knows that I push against that. I think, once again, it's the control issue of being like, no, it's all for the moment. It's all for the dead. There's no plan. There's no larger thing to this. I wanted to thank you very much for sharing as well, Barry. I wanted to touch upon something because people have already commented about it. Elise commented on it. I think Colleen commented on it as well. And that's the power of In Search Of. And how so many of us older folks
I've never
who are
heard
into
of
this. She's like, who's Leonard Nimoy? I don't even know who that guy is. There used to be a TV show called Star Trek. Not Chris Pine, a different Star Trek.
Okay.
Not Michael Giacchino doing the music, but Jerry Goldsmith originally.
Okay, keep going. Off topic.
Okay, so I should get back on.
Yeah,
okay, this is how we go beyond an hour when we talk.
This is what happens. Yeah, I know.
And it was an amazing show. And I would also put up there, like, I am from the generation of coming off of In Search Of. Time Life books. The Time Life books were huge. And also sightings. So for those of you guys who don't know sightings, for our younger members of the audience, it was set up almost as a news show, right? So it had kind of we are vintage, Elise. It had the feeling of In Search Of. And In Search Of treated this stuff as if it were real. These were presented as if they were documentaries, that these things were 100% real. They were narrated by Leonard Nimoy, like trusted person Leonard Nimoy. They were presented as if, let me tell you what they're trying to hide from you. And we got these stories, and there was, and the good thing about it was a potpourri. Like, you didn't just get ghosts, and you didn't just get Bigfoot. It was like, depending on what week it was, and those of us who were inclined to the supernatural and to the paranormal actually like meshed those things. So I think we're more likely to have that mindset of we're into the paranormal and the supernatural, as opposed to younger people who might be more specialized in, I only do UFOs and stuff like that. Barry, we should do a whole episode just on puck wedgies, but not tonight. There's a little tease for you. Sightings was kind of the next level of that. So sightings, I think, was in the late 90s. And sightings, the difference between sightings and other shows was, this is my memory of it. And if you notice, the picture that I posted of this has In Search Of, and it has sightings in there. And sightings presented itself as if it were a news show, right? So I don't remember how many of you guys remember this. Maybe you just remember the cases and stuff that they went on. But sightings, like, there was a news desk, and oftentimes the guy was talking in front of of a screen, and it felt like Entertainment Tonight. Not that Entertainment Tonight is a news show, but you get what I'm saying. This idea of, like, this was something to be taken seriously. And it had really engaging questions. It had, I'm forgetting his last name. Someone in here has to know, but James, the psychic on it, and it's almost like you could follow his progress through these cases as well. He was involved in so many of them. And there was this real feeling of truth to it, right? It was presented as if, like, it was part of new, like, this just in, the world is haunted. And I became totally addicted to that show. And then coming off of that was America's Most Haunted, I think. But not the British TV show, which I guess would be Britain's Most Haunted. But it was, America's Haunted Places, I think it was. It was on ABC Family. And once again, no, it wasn't James Van Prague. It was something James, he died probably about, I think, 7 years ago now. Yes, he had black hair and a mustache, but it's not James Prague. What was I talking about? The one on ABC Family, and it was once again presented as real, and it was these families were going out there, like, they would go to one episode where they just talked about a place, and then they would do another one where they'd take a family. Later on, they took a family and sent them to that place, and that was less cool. And we of the older generation hold on to those shows. And I think there's a very definite split. And if you don't think there's a split in this, then I think you're naive. 2004 marks kind of like everything before 2004 and everything after 2004. And 2004 would be the premiere of Ghost Hunters. And whereas I think Sightings and In Search Of and America's Most Haunted, or wherever that show was called, I think those were the kind of ones that popped you, right? They popped. They made you want to experience the paranormal. They made you feel as if the paranormal was something real and you wanted it, right? And you wanted to do something. And then maybe you went out, and I would go out, and what now I would look back on and I'd say was probably more legend tripping than it was investigating. Ghost Hunters premieres, and now the shift goes from wanting to, like, consume an experience to go out and investigate. And I think that there's a bias with people whose entry into the paranormal is Ghost Hunters and the other reality shows that focus on investigating. And I think a lot of times people consider the children of those TV shows to be less worthy as investigators, or less, helpful in the field, or less credible in the field than those of us old ones that are doing it. And there was a really good, I think, Tim, either through Spooky South Coast or through Midnight in the Desert, or maybe it was his personal one, had this debate about this kind of thing. and what makes a good investigator and that kind of stuff. And I think the people down those people who kind of made their bones and were inspired by ghost hunters. Now, if you take how many people started investigating after that and how many people were bad, right? Or they were doing things the wrong way, or I think that, yeah, like it became more visible, more people were doing it, and so more people were doing it in a screwed up way. But I don't think that we can kind of look back at those people who were inspired by those TV shows to go out and do something. I don't think we can look down on them. And I'm kind of tired of people doing it, right? I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for a real long time now. I can accept that someone watched a TV show about how to be an investigator and went out and investigated. Do I wish that they had done more research? Do I wish they had read books about it? Do I wish they had read my books about it? Yes, but I don't think we can condone their end. I think everyone's paranormal in is, if you want to talk about a Reiki thing, everyone's paranormal in is the right in for them. It's what they do with it. So if you're going out and you're doing something and you're being dangerous and you're not doing it the right way, then obviously that's something to be said for you. Dave makes an excellent point. He says, ghost hunters got me out of my armchair, right? Because this was really the first time, even as, I want to say his name was maybe Edward James. We could look at something like the movie Poltergeist, which is a huge paranormal influence for me. Or we can look at sightings. Or we can even look at some of the documentaries that were made and say, well, those people were professional. Those people had degrees. Even Ghostbusters, those guys were all doctors, right? That's not me. I can't do that. Like, I can't do what those people are doing. Those people are professional somehow. And then Ghost Hunters comes along and we say, oh, I can do this. And I think that became a legitimate spark and inspiration for a lot of people who ended up doing really interesting things. And I'm not saying they necessarily had to make an impact on the world with their investigating, but like it gave people an opportunity to go out there and do something that they felt passionate about. Did they always do it right? No, but I think that's pretty much the same for everything, right? The problem is, and I think of an old West Wing episode where they're talking to the guy that eventually became Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., like
I
the
think
main
you
guy.
bring West Wing or Gilmore Girls or Buffy into every single.
I've already talked about Buffy and now West Wing. I'm going to fit Gilmore Girls in later. He says, that's deep. He says in the episode, he's an FBI agent, and he's talking, and he says, essentially, our successes you never hear about. You only hear about our failures. The FBI, you never really hear when they stop something. You only hear when they messed up with something. And I think that's the same thing with paranormal investigators or people who are out there doing paranormal work. They only make news in the month of October, and they only make news when they do stuff wrong, right? When an idiot goes and breaks into a place, or someone in Connecticut shoots somebody who thinks it's a ghost,
or you're naked ghost hunting. Remember that?
Or you're naked ghost hunting, and you get caught somewhere. We don't hear our successes. We don't hear about the good work we do. A lot of people are out there. Now, I'm not one of these people. Like, I don't work with clients anymore. A lot of people are helping families out. A lot of people are helping people either come to deal with the paranormal that's impacting them, or even helping spirits potentially move on. You just hear when they screw up, right? And so it does seem like there's a very tight connection with that. Barry, thank you very much for stopping in tonight. I hope that you become a regular on the live show, and I'd love to talk to you about my Pukwudgie stuff, which I would do a whole Pukwudgie show, but I feel like everyone's heard so much about it. But if you guys want me to do an entire my Pukwudgie experience show, I'll do that. If you want me to, request. But thank you very much, Barry. It's okay. It's okay for your paranormal in to be something stupid. It's okay for it to be a reality show. It's okay if your first time hearing about cryptozoology is watching Rob Lowe and his kids looking for a Bigfoot, like, whatever. That's all, as long as you're doing something with it after that. Paranormal outs. Natalie, I know you're less familiar with the field as we call it. What do you feel is probably the biggest reason why people get out of the paranormal?
It becomes too intense.
It becomes too intense?
It becomes too intense. Yeah, absolutely. Or They go about it the wrong way, investigating or tripping, whatever which way they're doing it, and they get into trouble. Trespassing where they're not supposed to be, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it becomes too intense.
Yeah,
Too scary.
and that's the paranormal part of it. I think the non-paranormal part is groups suck. Right? So I don't know if you caught the conversation I was having online with Dr. Stark this week.
No, I didn't.
But she was basically saying, essentially every time she gets a group started, like all this stuff gets in the way and it ends up getting in the way of actually doing what she wants to do. Groups suck. Don't form paranormal groups. I'm going to say it again. I've been saying it for 20 years now. Don't form a paranormal group. Find people that you work well with and that have skills that inspire you or that work well with you, and go out and do what you want to do with them. Do not form a paranormal group. Just because I'm wearing a black shirt tonight.
What constitutes a group? Exactly.
Well, okay, and that's an interesting question.
More than one person?
Well, I know it's right, but I'm talking more of a paranormal group is a group of people. They have a name. Everyone has a function within it. They've got a case manager. They've got people who do very specific. Natalie, you can tell, is not touching the field because she's looking at like, what? They've got case managers? They've got that. There's often training programs that are involved with it. And the problem with that is that and this is nothing new except for to Natalie. This is nothing new, but like then you get all the politics anytime you get groups of people together. So who's the leader? Who's going to do this evidence? The drama with this, and you did my girlfriend, and all the stuff like that gets involved with what the stuff is. And I think a lot of people, yes, you get a title.
Is it?
And I will always
worse
say,
in the paranormal industry?
What do you mean? Is it worse in the paranormal industry?
Yes.
I
group
think
of people. I mean, people make groups for every industry.
I don't think it's. I think it's
suck in general?
It's different. Yes. Don't talk to people. Don't form groups. No, but I think in the paranormal, because there's also that intensity that you're talking about the investigating.
Okay.
And also there's groups tend to assistant manager battery. Okay, so Dave posted assistant manager of battery distribution. I've got that beat. When I was writing Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting, I started researching groups and I became obsessed with ghost groups more than with ghosts. My favorite title was Cynic in Training or Skeptic in Training. He wasn't skeptical yet. He had to be trained on how to say, I don't believe that. Like, that was my favorite title. There was actually a group. The politics get in the way. And I think that's a lot of people then get discouraged dealing with the group. And then so they get out of the paranormal because of that. And so I think, if you mix that with the intensity of the situations that you're in, this overall, like, we need to prove that something is real, that other people don't. On one hand, it unifies the people, right? Because they're together in a group, and most people don't believe. And so they're bonded by that. But then what happens is, well, you touched my flashlight, and you said you were going to do this, and I'm doing all the work here, and I want a child change. And then when it really interferes with it. So I think a lot of people leave what they're doing because they find a really crappy group to be in. And they associate being in a paranormal group because maybe, once again, they're children of ghost hunters. They associate the paranormal with a paranormal group. And it was funny because they used to say it was a group all the time. And so people would say, okay, well, who is Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads? How many members do you have? I'd say Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads is a website. I'm me. Love me or hate me, I'm me. I think we should about wrap it up. What do you think?
Yeah, and on that note.
Yeah, I think so. I'd love for you guys to still keep Dave. I think we should just collect a website of the most messed up group stories that ever happened, because I know they get into sexual things. They get into
with the paranormal, because we've done an episode about that too.
Stuff. No, they get into but like people sleeping with each other and people doing this, and husbands and wives in groups together, and
those are called swingers.
And on that note, I already kind of have my topic for next week. I'm not going to even tease it right now.
Yes, you have to.
It's kind of along the same lines a little bit. Like, as I was thinking of this one, I thought about that one, which is So I want you guys to start thinking about it. We're going to try to do it on Wednesday night or maybe Thursday night, depending on when we get the episode out. But what is the most influential moment in paranormal history? So start thinking about that for next week. Don't
Ooh, are you
Don't
gonna
start
limit it
commenting.
to world history or American?
Yes. Okay, so don't post any response to that yet, but I want you to be thinking about it. If you want to hit me up in private to kind of like get the juices flowing so I can bring in some things, maybe we'll do like a survey over the course of the week so we have something to like bring in what people have said. I know what mine is, but I'm not going to share with you right now. Maybe I'll share with you later if you're good. But that's what sex is one of them. I hope that's not the big paranormal moment. I hope you're responding to another question, Dave.
What?
The greatest paranormal moment of all time is sex. No, maybe for you it is. I'm not judging. We're gonna go off air tonight.
He did say he had.
We're trying to get this under an hour. So, my name is Christopher Balzano.
Oh wait, Rita.
What?
Rita just commented.
Okay.
You have to read Rita's.
When I was 14, my dad was trying to sell his house, and we had some experiences, and he never wanted to go back there. So he sent me. It was horrifyingly spooky in one of the basements and one part of the upstairs. It made my skin crawl and felt terror in the pit of my stomach. But the fun part was my dad told me to rip the wallpaper off in the dining room walls. I did. There I was, 6 layers, and I took large pieces and folded them up and put them in my pocket. I heard noises in the attic. I ran up to see what was going on. I'm getting interference here.
And it made me sick with fear. So then I heard noise in the basement, so I went down to see what was there. I went down, and it was more horrifying than the attic. There were big windows, and it was really dark at the end of the basement, and it felt like I was not alone and like I was in danger. I flew up those stairs, and I felt like I was being pulled at. The topper was when I was back in the dining room and the wallpaper was back in the wall.
But I still have those pieces in my pocket.
Whoa, that is freaky.
That is crazy.
That is
so
crazy. When she was back in the dining room, the wallpaper was back in the wall.
So in other words, she ripped it off,
but
and she came back, and it was back on.
in my pocket. Anyways, the house never got sold. So where is it now?
So where's that house? We're all meeting at that house
Right?
on Saturday.
But it's not a group because the group will fail.
We will not have matching shirts. So we do have to sign off, but you guys can keep sharing your stories with us. We'll keep this chat part of it going, but even if you just want to share on Tripping on Legends or on my page, we'll keep this kind of this idea. I would love to know people's paranormal in and your paranormal out, even if your out is just your potential out, like what is driving you crazy that makes you want to stop doing it. So please
What would make you stop?
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Please follow us up. We've got episodes coming up talking about Astor Library. We've got some special guests coming up. Please follow us on Facebook, which you're already probably doing right now. Tripping on Legends, facebook.com, Tripping on Legends. The website is trippingonlegends.wordpress.com. You can follow me on Twitter at SpookyBalzano. Okay, and don't follow Natalie. The Instagram is Spooky Tripping, and the email is spookytripping@gmail.com. Please listen to the show on iTunes. We've got some really great episode that we just posted. But if you're interested in some of this stuff, we've got some really good episodes about legends. But also, if you enjoyed the live show, we've got the live shows that are up there as well. And those are actually videos, so you can get those as well. So keep following, keep supporting us, and we will keep providing content for you. I am Christopher Balzano.
And I'm Natalie Christ.
And here's hoping all your trips are legendary. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Have a great night. And end.